Wagner Yevgeny Prigozhin's announcement of the withdrawal of troops, causing heavy damage to the Russian army, covered the city of Bakhmut with incendiary weapons. Artillery and air force fired incendiary phosphorus munitions at Ukrainian defenses. Deputy Minister Hanna Malier stressed that this tactic did not surprise the Ukrainian army because the Russians had done it in the city of Mariupol before. Russian officers and soldiers captured at the front also informed the Ukrainians out of fear for their own lives. She also said that after Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin announced the withdrawal of troops on May 10, the morale of the Russian army was very low. In the suburbs of Bakhmut city, fighting for a while, they fled, leaving behind a lot of military vehicles. In the last 24 hours, 560 Russian soldiers have been eliminated from the battle, along with 7 tanks, 14 armored vehicles, 14 artillery systems, 2 multiple launch missile systems, 2 air defense systems, and 20 transport vehicles. Troops and fuel. Overall, from February 24, 2022 to May 6, 193,770 Russian soldiers were eliminated from the battle. In addition, the Ukrainian army destroyed or captured 3,717 Russian tanks, 7,238 armored vehicles, 2,992 artillery systems, 552 multiple launch missile systems, 306 air defense systems, 308 aircraft, 294 helicopters, 2,554 tactical combat drones, 947 cruise missiles, 18 warships, 5,936 troop and fuel transport vehicles, and 375 special equipment units. 2. Infamous Kremlin propagandist Zakhar Prilepin was assassinated. Russian state news agency TASS reported that Zakhar Prilepin, a notorious Russian nationalist propaganda writer, was wounded in the attack. A car bomb attack in the Nizhny Novgorod region on Saturday. Russia immediately blamed Ukraine and the West. TASS cited a source in the emergency services as saying the writer's car had blown up. The source was quoted as saying, "He survived, but was seriously injured while still conscious. The person sitting next to him passed away at the scene." The reality is clear. Washington and NATO harbor another international terrorist group, the Kiev regime, said Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova. She said it was the direct responsibility of the US and UK, but offered no evidence to support the accusation. "We pray for Zakhar," she added. According to the Russian Interior Ministry, another person in the car was killed. He was traveling with his family. State news agencies said his leg was injured. According to initial reports, one person was killed by the explosion and the writer Zakhar Prilepin, who was in the car, was injured in the Nizhny Novgorod region, about 400 kilometers east of Moscow. Prilepin, 47, one of Russia's most famous propaganda writers, joined pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine in 2014 and fought alongside them. A Chechen veteran, he frequents eastern Ukraine and was a strong supporter of the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, and the invasion of February 2022. The incident followed a series of attacks and obvious sabotage on Russian territory, sometimes far from the front. In April, an explosion from an explosives-tipped statue killed 40-year-old military blogger who supported the Kremlin Vladlen Tatarsky. And last August, Daria Dugina, the daughter of a famous radical nationalist intellectual, was killed in a car bomb outside Moscow, which Russia blamed on Ukraine. Kiev denies all charges. 3. The explosion rocked the northern part of the Crimean Peninsula invaded by Russia. Russia closed the bridge to track down the perpetrators. On Saturday morning, May 6, explosions were heard in the town of Zankhoy in the northern part of the Russian-invaded Crimea. This morning, there were explosions in Zankhoy, said Sergei Aksionov, the governor of Crimea, which was erected by Russia in the temporarily occupied Crimea. Air defense systems are working. No casualties or damage have been reported. On social media, locals wrote that vehicles were not allowed to leave the peninsula across the Kerch Strait Bridge this morning. According to the official version provided by the so-called Crimean Ministry of Transport, traffic was blocked for technical reasons. However, many well-informed sources believe that the Russian Federal Security Service, or FSB for short, is hunting for suspects involved in the explosion. By 9:50, traffic was restored. It is not yet clear whether the explosion was caused by a bomb or by a drone strike. 4. Russia threatens armed conflict with US as White House dismisses Kremlin statement as ridiculous. The United States has denied ridiculous accusations from Russia that it was behind the drone attack on the Kremlin. In response, Deputy Foreign Minister Moscow warned that the two powers were on the brink of open armed conflict. According to state media TASS, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov told Channel 1 television on Thursday that we are working to prevent relations with the United States from falling into the abyss of a conflict openly armed. We are standing on the edge of this abyss. His comments come after Moscow made baseless claims that the US was behind the drone attack on the Kremlin to assassinate President Vladimir Putin earlier this week. Kyiv and Washington have denied the allegations. Ryabkov said Moscow and Washington are in contact as needed, including at a high level, but added that Washington has long been a direct party to the conflict in Ukraine and has the aim of destroying Russia. On Thursday, Russia accused Washington of being behind the drone attack on the Kremlin and plotting to assassinate Putin. It is the latest in an unusual series of allegations about Wednesday's incident. We know well that decisions about such actions and such terrorist attacks are not made in Kyiv but in Washington. And Kyiv did what it was told to do, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said without providing any evidence. In response, the Pentagon spokesman denied the U.S. involvement in the drone attack on the Kremlin and accused the spokesman of Russian President Vladimir Putin of lying. I just want to tell you that Dmitry Peskov is lying. I mean, that's clearly a ridiculous statement. The United States has nothing to do with this. We don't even know what happened here, said John Kirby, Strategic Communications Coordinator for the National Security Council. I can assure you that the United States has no role in that. The White House has yet to indicate who is behind the drone attack and said the White House does not support, we do not encourage, we do not support attacks against people, individual leaders, added Kirby. 5. Ukraine says, Russian warship withdraws from Crimea waters as attacks increase. Newsweek has a report titled Russia warships retreat from Crimea's waters as attacks intensify, Ukraine, meaning Ukraine says, Russian warships withdraw from Crimean waters as attacks increase. Russia has moved most of the Black Sea Fleet's warships from its main base in Crimea to safer waters on Russian territory, according to a senior Ukrainian military intelligence official. Major General Vadim Skibitsky, deputy director of Ukraine's military intelligence, said in an interview with Kyiv TV channel that the Kremlin decided to move the ships out of fear of missile attacks. The official headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet is located in Sevastopol, the largest city in Crimea and the site of several drone attacks in recent weeks. Although Ukraine has not claimed responsibility for the drone attacks, Mikhail Razvozayev, the governor of Sevastopol appointed by the Kremlin, has said that Kyiv was behind the attacks, which are believed to have caused thousands of deaths. A series of major fires, the most serious being at a fuel depot in the area on Saturday. In this context, the High Command of the Russian Navy redirected most of the ships of the Black Sea Fleet from Sevastopol back to the Russian city of Novorossiysk. We see that the Russians are scared. That base in Sevastopol and other military facilities is now heavily guarded. According to Ukrainska Pravda, Russian invaders are equipping positions to defend against attacks on this infrastructure, Skibitsky said. Skibitsky determined that the warships had been moved about 220 miles from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk. Kyiv Post describes Novorossiysk, located on the east coast of the Black Sea in Russia's southern Kuban region, as out of range of possible anti-ship missile launch sites from Ukrainian-controlled territory. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky asserted that Crimea, which was invaded and annexed by Russia in 2014, belongs to Ukraine. He has also repeatedly stated that the re-recognition of Crimea as part of his country is one of his conditions for a ceasefire in the war that Russian President Vladimir Putin started in February 2022. Meanwhile, Russian officials remain adamant that Crimea must be part of Russia in any future peace talks. In addition, the Kremlin has said that the 4 additional territories it illegally annexed in September 2022 must also be recognized as Russian. Will Reno, dean of the Political Science Department at Northwestern University, told Newsweek that he was not surprised that Russia considered moving its expensive ships away from Sevastopol. It is possible that Russian planners predicted that ships could come within range of missiles such as HIMARS in the event that a Ukrainian attack would allow repositioning closer to Russian naval bases, said Reno. To demonstrate Ukraine's ability to attack the Russian Navy, Reno cited examples such as Ukraine's April 2022 attack that resulted in the sinking of the Moskva, the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet. Russia's Black Sea Fleet has been reduced to a coastal force, at least in some respects. This development is a lesson for U.S. planners, said Reno. There is a doubt that current offensive weapons put naval power at a disadvantage, especially large expensive ships whose relatively inexpensive offensive weapons can damage or destroy. Thinking about the Western Pacific, would large investments in warships be the wisest use of resources? 6. Putin's allies vow to send troops to Bakhmut to replace Wagner's forces. Newsweek ran an article titled "Putin ally vows to send troops to Bakhmut to replace Wagner's forces," which means Putin's allies vow to send troops to Bakhmut to replace Wagner's forces. Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov on Friday said he would send troops to fight in Bakhmut if the Wagner group withdrew from the Ukrainian city. Kadyrov, a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, made the pledge in a statement on his official Telegram channel. Earlier on the same day, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of Russia's Wagner mercenary group, announced that he would withdraw all of his fighters from Bakhmut on May 10 due to lack of ammunition. Prior to this announcement, Prigozhin released a video in which he angrily blamed top Russian officials for the deaths of Wagner fighters because his units were not supplied with enough ammunition. In his statement, Kadyrov lamented the unpleasant discord between Prigozhin and Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov. He said it was doubly annoying that the Defense Ministry did not meet with Prigozhin because he deserves respect for the invaluable contribution he made in the fight against the Ukrainian president's forces. Volodymyr Zelensky since the invasion of Russia on February 24, 2022. Kadyrov asked Russian officials to respond to Prigozhin's accusations that Wagner was not supplied with enough ammunition. He then recounted how Chechen units fighting in Mariupol, Ukraine, had faced similar weapons problems. "I personally phoned Moscow, talked to commanders, superiors. A month later, the issue was resolved," he said. Yes, it was not resolved on the first call. But our units didn't take video, they didn't create interesting information opportunities for the enemy. The Chechen leader later reprimanded Prigozhin for showing the bodies of dead Wagner soldiers in his video, saying that it is wrong to film the bodies of dead comrades for the sake of outcry, left. "We should never do that." Kadyrov writes that Chechen units fought alongside Wagner troops in the most difficult areas of Ukraine. However, he said that if brother Prigozhin and Wagner left, then he and his army would step in to fill the void in Bakhmut. "If the scenario remains like this, then our warriors are ready to advance and take the city. It was a matter of only a few hours," he said. Jason J. Smart, a political consultant on international and post-Soviet politics, told Newsweek that Kadyrov's statement showed he was desired to please his boss, Putin. However, sending the Chechens raises a question: why have they not taken part in the Battle of Bakhmut so far? Smart added, all of this really shows how Kadyrov is trying to win over Putin, while at the same time proving that Russia's regular army is hopeless without outside help. Kadyrov has been officially blacklisted by many countries and has been sanctioned by the U.S. State Department for human rights violations, as well as by the European Union, the United Kingdom and several others. Newsweek has reached out to the Russian Foreign Ministry by email for comment. 7. Russia began to evacuate from the Zaporizhzhia area at the risk of a general counteroffensive by Ukraine. Russian-installed authorities in the annexed region of Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia on Friday announced the evacuation of some residents in 18 frontline settlements on the grounds of reinforced shelling. Over the past few days, the enemy has intensified shelling on settlements located near the lines of communication, the Russian-designated acting governor of the region Yevgeny Balitsky said in a statement on his Telegram channel. In this regard, I first decided to evacuate children, their parents, the elderly, the disabled, and patients from medical facilities from enemy fire and transfer them from the frontline territories to deep in the region. We cannot risk everyone's safety and will provide funding for organized travel, one-time payments, accommodation and meals. Temporary relocation will be organized in the area. Children of high school age will continue to study in educational institutions until the end of the school year. The children will be rehabilitated and rested in the children's camp, added Balitsky. Balitsky declared the evacuations a necessary measure designed to ensure the safety of residents in the frontline territories. Ukrainian officials said Russian forces used the evacuation as a means to force the deportation of Ukrainians. On Friday, local telegram channels of towns in the Zaporizhzhia region reported sightings of evacuation buses and said local authorities were informing residents that they had to pack their bags. 8. The First Lady of Ukraine is visiting the UK for the coronation of King Charles III. The coronation of King Charles III will take place on Saturday, May 6. On this occasion First Lady Zelenska and the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal, arrived in London as part of the official delegation of the Ukrainian authorities. During her visit, she met the wife of British Prime Minister Akshat Murty in London. Zelensky thanks the UK for its support of Ukraine, especially the organization of the Eurovision Song Contest together with its Ukrainian partners. Zelensky also noted another important event, the Ukraine Recovery Conference to be held in London in June this year. The President's Lady has granted Akshata Murti an invitation to the third summit of First Ladies and Gentlemen, which will be held in Kiev on September 6 and will be dedicated to the theme of health and wellness. Mental health. Year after year, the summit strengthens the role of First Ladies and Gentlemen. Together we become more dynamic to change the world for the better, Zelensky said. In addition, the First Lady of Ukraine and Akshata Murti visited the British Library together. One of the largest libraries in the world, 1.5 million visits per year, 170 million entries. And among these British Library artifacts is a collection of 100,000 Ukrainian copies. It includes important material on Holodomor on microfilm, one of two world-famous Lviv primer copies by first printer Ivan Fedorov, a rare edition of Taras Shevchenko's Kobzar Pocket, to read secretly during a time when the Ukrainian language was banned, many rare books and publications from Ukraine and the diaspora. The First Lady of Ukraine was also instructed by the British Defence Secretary to visit Ukrainian soldiers undergoing training in the UK. 9. Intelligence Bulletin of the UK Department of Defence Intelligence. In its latest intelligence report, the Intelligence Service of the UK Ministry of Defence said that the concerns of the Russian leadership about the risk of attack and the possibility of public protests against the war in the UK. Ukraine contributed to the decision to cancel many Victory Day parades, citing security concerns. 6 regions of Russia, Crimea were invaded and 21 cities cancelled the May 9 Victory Day parade due to safety concerns. Security. Victory Day commemorates the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany. Victory Day celebrations in Moscow are likely to take place, but on a smaller scale. Russian President Vladimir Putin's reception after the military parade, last held in 2019, will not take place. The traditional Immortal Regiment Parade, where family members display photographs of deceased World War II veterans, associated with Victory Day, has also been cancelled. This follows the recent cancellation of the International Army Games hosted by Russia. The timing of the drone strike on the Kremlin a few days before Victory Day shows that Russia is increasingly vulnerable to such attacks and has almost certainly increased its perception of the threat. Threat from the Russian leadership to the Victory Day events. The possibility of protests against the Ukraine war is also likely to influence the calculations of the Russian leadership. 10. French Senate website hacked by Russian hackers since Russia invaded Ukraine last year. Access to the site has been interrupted since this morning, the upper house of parliament said on Twitter just before midday, and said a team of technicians was working on fixing the problem. A group calling itself No Name on Telegram has claimed responsibility, saying it acted because France is working with Ukraine on a new aid package that could include many weapons. The same group said it disconnected the French parliament's website for several hours in March. It also claims to be behind the disruption of Canadian government websites last month when Ukraine's Prime Minister, Denis Shmyhal, visited the country. 11. The United Nations says Russia is making it difficult to negotiate grain exports in the Black Sea. Officials overseeing Ukraine's grain and fertilizer exports through the Black Sea have failed to reach an agreement to license any new ships. A United Nations spokesman said on Friday. Officials from Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and the United Nations are part of a group known as the Joint Coordination Center. For now, the group says it is continuing to inspect previously approved vessels but is encouraging countries to continue negotiations on new ships. As you will recall, the Secretary General informed all parties of his proposal of the way forward to improve and expand the initiative, taking into account the views of the parties. We urge all parties to continue the discussion, overcome operational challenges and work towards the full implementation and continuation of the initiative, said Farhan Haq, deputy spokesman for the United Nations. The export agreement was brokered by the United Nations and Turkey and signed by representatives of Russia and Ukraine last July. The agreement promises to unlock ports on the Black Sea to allow the safe passage of grains and oilseeds, following routes determined by Ukrainian maritime pilots to avoid mines, and stopping in Istanbul to secure weapons. 12. Bahraini Foreign Minister Abdul Latif bin Rashid Al Zayani visits Ukraine. Bahraini Foreign Minister Abdul Latif bin Rashid Al Zayani has visited Ukraine, the first visit by a foreign minister from a Gulf state to Ukraine since when it officially became independent from Russia in 1992. Zelensky said, I am grateful to Bahrain for their unwavering support of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity in the face of its resistance to all-out aggression of Russia. The visit of Bahraini Foreign Minister Abdul Latif bin Rashid Al Zayani to Ukraine is an important signal of cooperation and support between our countries. Ukraine strives for peace, and that is why I proposed the Ukraine peace formula to the international community. And we will be grateful to all the countries that really want to help Ukraine achieve peace. I invite Bahrain to participate in implementing several points of the formula and to participate in the upcoming peace summit. I am grateful to Bahrain for their unwavering support of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity in the face of Russia's all-out aggression.